Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's election day. Oh, I love it. As of Saturday, more than 72 million Americans had voted. 72 million. How many will have voted by today? The numbers just continue to increase. And you have a shy Harris voter, and you have the muted Trump voter. How are people voting? They're certainly not voting on party lines. The duopoly effectively has been broken in many respects. People are voting their pocketbooks, they're in their feelings about a lot of things. There's a lot going on. So let's talk about this. Where is this going? Where is this going? Who is voting? What are the trends saying? What does history tell us? And what are we seeing? Because we do have a lot of misinformation. A lot of it is being passed around by the corporate media. We're not really telling the stories of people in Michigan and uncommitted. And those some people who are uncommitted who are torn now, who are like, well, wait a minute, I've got an existential threat, I think, in Trump. But Trump is also saying, I don't want war. He did not say, some people might get upset with this, but he did not say that he wanted to line up Liz Cheney and kill her. He called her a chicken hawk. He said too many people call for war from the comfort of Washington, D.C. And how would she like it if someone lined her up and shot at her? That's what he said, everybody. I did not vote for him, but as someone who has grown up in public life and who has people that she has loved who have been lied on and misrepresented, stop it. There is a date called November 6th. We have to live with each other the day after the election. How are we going to do that? We've got to come together. America cannot afford these wars. We can't afford it. And pardon me for this, for what I'm saying before we begin this, but when you vote, I want you to keep that in mind. But this is about the common good. This is about getting our children educated or getting you educated if you need to change jobs. This is about you having a floor beneath which you should not fall. Some people are in line to become trillionaires. You can't even be a thousandaire. Are you really serious right now? And we're funding the killing of hundreds of thousands of people. It's in our faces right now. Think about that, everybody. And we're ignoring what's happening in Haiti. We're ignoring the Sudan. We're ignoring a lot. And we're at the center of a lot of this mischief. So think about this. We are the most powerful country in the world. I want us to be the best country in the world. How about that? Not great, best. Right makes might. Might doesn't make right. Think about that. So let's have this conversation today, because I think we need to figure out, everybody's talking about democracy being on the block. I think the Republic is on the block, and I think our souls are. Mm-hmm. Really. Yeah. So we've got Dr. Alia Amar, the Black Muslim Leadership Council. I'm so excited that you're here, neuropsychologist, my fellow dolphin from high school. But of course, you're back there with my brother Jonathan. She's a child, everybody, baby. But that's all right. We love her. She's brilliant, and has worked all over the world. And she's preeminent in her field, known the world over for fantastic work that you do. And of course, we've got the author of the book, The Revolt of the Rich, brilliant historian from the University of Arizona, Dr. David Gibbs. Let me start with him, Dr. Amar. I want to start with Dr. Gibbs because bless his heart, he's an you are an historian. I don't need to refer to you. I can speak to you and speak about you in the presence of Dr. Amar. And as a scientist, you give us really an objective view.
I try to.
I mean, well, you say, look, I'm trying to give you the data. I'm trying to give you the facts as I see them. I'm trying to put all of what we're seeing in the context of history. So if you could tell me, first of all, just in modern times and terms, what are we looking at? Help me to understand this, because when I see last week we had like 38 million people who voted. And Dr. Amar, when I looked at the numbers yesterday and said 72 million,
yeah,
I said, whoa, people are going out in droves, even where they've had the devastation in North Carolina. They're breaking records in terms of voting. Now, are they at the same levels as Obama? No, but that was a very special a once in the lifetime of a Republican election because you had a black man who could go to the White House. But now that we're over that, oh, my dear friend, the Tony Award winning creator of The Wiz, Jeffrey Holmes, used to say, after you have had your most magnificent performance, what do you do for an encore? Okay, so now where are we? What are we looking at? Dr. Gibbs. Class is in session.
To me, one of the most impressive features about the recent trends has been the extent to which sort of the neoconservatives in the Republican Party have gravitated to the Democratic Party, most prominently the Cheney family, but there are many others. Victoria Nuland, who was a major architect of the U.S. policy towards Russia and Ukraine in both Obama and the Biden State Department, had been the national security advisor to Richard Cheney until Hillary Clinton ushered her into the State Department. The whole series of neoconservatives ushered in, especially by Hillary Clinton, and they've been there ever since. And I think it transformed not only the State Department, but the Democratic Party has been transformed into being something I really find quite astonishing, which is even more warlike than the Republicans. Gaza, Israel, Lebanon, I don't unfortunately see any difference between either party. If Trump wins, unfortunately, I don't see any change to the complete support of the vast mass killing Israel's doing all over the Middle East, basically. If Israel attacks Iran, there's a good chance that the United States will backstop them, perhaps even get directly involved. I assume what Israel wants is to get the U.S. more directly involved with direct U.S. force. That may happen. I certainly hope not, but that's a real possibility. I just don't see any real difference between the two parties on that issue.
No, stop there. Why do you say that? Because some people would give you pushback on that because they're saying, Dr. Amar, wait a minute. I feel that Vice President Harris is going to be different. And I said, feelings are not policies, right?
What the Democrats do with some degree of skill is to wring their hands and express regret about the suffering of the Palestinian people selectively, depending on their audience. And then they backstop Israel completely. They supply Israel with whatever arms it needs. They supply Israel with whatever financial support they need to buy the arms or just get the arms directly for free. They send U.S. aircraft carriers and ships to intercept missiles. They vote in favor of Israel before the United Nations, sometimes the only or almost the only country defending them in some cases. And this has happened completely during the Biden administration. And any criticism the U.S. makes seems to have no credibility because the U.S. could immediately stop what's going on there right now in an instant by saying, we're not giving you any more support. The money, the arms, political support, we're cutting that off right now. Or alternatively, they could condition the support on either, you have an immediate ceasefire, you start giving credible movement towards a two-state solution, or we'll cut you off. They haven't done either. And I'm not seeing anything on the horizon suggesting they have any intention of doing that. And all the hand-wringing we're seeing from Kamala Harris, and that we've seen from people like Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, insofar as I can tell, is insincere because it's not backed up by anything credible. And until I see something credible, like we will cut Israel off, I'm not going to take it seriously. And I don't think anybody else should take it seriously either. Needless to say, Trump has just completely been engaging in almost sociopathic rhetoric in terms of endorsing what Israel is doing. But again, it's only a difference of rhetoric. As far as I could tell, the policy would be essentially the same. Maybe more cited sociopathic rhetoric, whereas you get the moralistic hand-wringing out of the Democrats. But I'm not that interested in rhetoric. I think the only thing that matters is substance. Substantively, there's no difference. Now, I think on Ukraine and Russia, there may be a difference. And certainly, it sounds as though Trump will move towards U.S. disengagement from Ukraine, which I think would be a good thing, since the U.S., quite frankly, triggered this war needlessly. It blocked peace negotiations that could have settled this war. That's not being widely reported, but those are the facts. And if anybody really wants to look at them carefully, and it's cost hundreds of thousands of lives needlessly. It's brought to the world to the brink of nuclear war, and that's very concerning to me, and I think it should be to everyone else. And it may be the case. I say this with some caution that Trump might be more willing to disengage on this issue. And the reason I say that is that the tone here is one of disengagement. Now, one has to be cautious. The reason one has to be cautious is that Trump sounded that way in 2016 as well. And he increased U.S. support, not just military support for Ukraine, but also helped set America on the road to war in many respects. So he talked one way and acted another way. And so there's an open question as to what he'll actually do. Everyone knows he's very unpredictable. And so I'd be, one thing that is predictable, in the Middle East, I think will be predictable. I'd be very surprised if we see any divergence from what we've seen so far in the Middle East. On the Ukraine, it's not so clear, and he may consider disengagement. I think that's a possibility. J.D. Vance has much more consistently been very critical of U.S. policy in Ukraine. And I think it's a pity the left has lost its sense of non-interventionism and anti-militarism, again, with the exception of the Middle East. In the Middle East, the left has had a more traditional anti-interventionist view. But on Ukraine, Russia, and on things like the Syrian civil war, and before that, the Afghanistan war, the left has been away without leave, shall we say. It's been AWOL. And you really had a decline, if not a near disintegration of the anti-war left. A very striking thing, I'm old enough to remember in the 1980s, there were mass demonstrations against nuclear weapons. There were calls for disarmament. That's completely disappeared.
I remember the organization Sane Freeze.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
That's all gone. There's nothing like that anymore. You never hear the issue brought up at all. And it's really, it's a shame because that's a huge threat to humanity. And it reflects badly, I think, on the American political left that they've gone in that direction, but they have, in Europe as well.
But wait a minute, whoa, stop. Hold on. What happened? And I just wanted to explain this before you respond, Dr. Omar, because I need us to get an historical frame. What happened? Because now the Democrats are the war party.
Yep.
And you got Donald Trump saying, because he was asked to clarify his remarks about Liz Cheney and everybody. I'm no Trump apologist, but I don't trope in lies.
Yeah.
I want the truth.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see misstatements because a lot of lives are on the line. And people whose children don't go to war and who've never been to war call for war. That angers me. There's something called a poverty draft, everybody. These kids who want to get a leg up, who don't want to deal drugs in the neighborhood, who try to do something else. And I'm not mad at anybody who's doing whatever they're doing to survive, because this stuff is jammed in our communities, and these are the only options that our young people are given, and our older people. You have some brilliant business people who are not given the opportunity. We're shutting their schools. Mm-hmm. For heaven's sake. And so now I'm looking at these poor kids, literally, not these poor young people who are going into war. And then when they see when they find out the mission, when they get over there, they come back over here angry.
Yep, I agree.
Broken. And
and there you go. And angry.
Yeah.
What are we doing? How did the Democrats end up over here, and the Republicans end up with the poor people, the working class, the people who don't want any war? Help me.
Well, we stopped having a left in the United States. We don't actually have a left. What we call the left would be unrecognizable as a progressive party in any other industrialized nation. What we have is a party that became more and more concerned, one, with establishment politics, and then finally with the politics of money. And that's a chicken and an egg, by the way, because those came about at the same time. By the time you had Citizens United, you definitely had a party that was just much more concerned about how to survive if billionaires and corporations were going to be able to donate at huge levels and influence the population. But that wasn't the linchpin, really. I think that the Democratic Party would have begun to have leaned further and further to the right, even if Citizens United had not been decided in the way that it was.
They've been doing that. I mean, look, in reaction to, I remember when we bumped into the organizing papers of the DLC, the Democratic Leadership Council, that Reverend called the Democrats for the Leisure Class.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Bill Clinton, it was
Yes.
Nunn, it was Al Gore, it was Al Fromm, it was Chuck Robb. They said, look, in order to counterbalance the 2.5 million voters brought on by Reverend Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition, we are forming this council. If we're not successful in undoing this progressive shift in the party, we will leave the party and become Republicans. They were the Blue Dog Democrats.
Yeah. But our leaders in the Democratic Party are no longer coming from the activist core. They are coming from cores very much composed of more elite people who have no allegiance to a progressive agenda. And let's make no mistake, what progressives are inevitably fighting for, if you listen to core messages, are core democratic values. The right of protection from unreasonable search and seizure, the right to be protected against intrusion of government into your private life unnecessarily, protection against unfair taxation. These are things that you keep hearing in the messages against, the factors that impoverish our neighborhood, endanger our lives. When people are out on the street as activists, at least from the left, they are inevitably fighting for core democratic values to be applied universally. When Palestinians are out there fighting and arguing along with coalitions of others to stop this genocide, what is a core message from them? It's, hey, why have we suspended the law when it comes to one nation on this planet, both domestic and international law? We have the United States ignoring repeatedly rulings by the International Court of Justice, but also ignoring domestically the Leahy Law. If we are a country of laws, we need to start by following our own, but we need a party that upholds that as a value. And we do not have in America a party willing to do that at this particular point.
Well, it's two wings of the same bird.
Yep.
We don't have two parties. We don't. We have one. We have two different corporate appeals. Two cultural appeals.
Right.
Maybe that was a Freudian slip. Two cultural appeals. But that's really it. And I get the sense, Dr. Amar and Dr. Gibbs, pivoting back to you, that Americans are tiring of this. Mm-hmm. It seems like the jig, if it's not up, it's close to it. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that because I can't track. And a lot of people are having a hard time tracking who's voting and how they're voting. Because, you got some women who are breaking for Kamala, and then you've got some people who just very quietly, I got Trump. Mm-hmm. And they're not all raging racists, everybody. They're not. People are fed up. And we have to have an appreciation for that because most people are not doing well. They're not. You can read all the statistics you want to me. I just know when I go to the grocery store, the money I spend, and I have not bought a chicken. And I'm trying to figure out I bought some beans, I bought some rice, but what am I doing? But Dr. Gibbs, what do you see with this election? Who's voting? What is happening here? Because I'm mystified, really.
In 2016, one thing, there was a survey that found that a significant number of Democrats who moved to Trump moved towards him because they believed he was less warlike than Hillary Clinton, believe it or not. And that was actually a significant, not the top factor, but a significant factor. In some counties, apparently a lot of counties where that had a lot of deaths and injuries from the war on terror, it seems, had that effect. And let me say that, I mentioned before, but I'll mention it again, that where I teach in Southern Arizona, I have gotten a lot of military personnel in my classes, and I have seen them become very alienated from the idea of overseas adventures based on lies. And that's how a lot of them see it, and they say so. And they've seen the devastation it's done to people who didn't come back or came back physically and mentally damaged. And it doesn't leave a positive impression for overseas adventures. And I think there is an awareness that this has been a real cost. And yes, it has been mostly poorer people, a multiracial working class that's been sent over damaged this way. And it hasn't left a positive impression. Many of these people are Republicans. And so I think that is one of the reasons you're getting at least anti-war rhetoric coming selectively from the Republican Party. It is impressive in a certain historical sense to hear Trump saying Liz Cheney is a war hawk, a radical war hawk, I think is what he called her. She doesn't know what it's like to fight. She should go out there, take a rifle, and see what it's like when people point rifles at her. That's the kind of thing the left's been saying for decades, and now Trump says it. And people claim that he's making a threat in Liz Cheney's life, which is ridiculous. It's not what he was saying. And again, I'm certainly not, in any sense of the word, sympathetic to Trump.
I'm not either, but
what he said.
You know what's being lost, Dr. Gibbs? The anti-war message.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like someone's being vilified for saying, look, I don't want any. He just said he sat there and it's just like his head dropped. He said, I don't want war. And I'm not saying that he's a peacenik.
No.
But I mean, if someone says, John Kennedy said that, excuse me. It seems like when you stand up against war, when you want to end the genocide over in Gaza, which is expanding, we got a world war on our hands, right? I mean, right here, right now. And we keep thinking that it's going to be boots on the ground. Cyber warfare. I mean, our infrastructure is so vulnerable in the United States. I mean, what? This is insane to me. And that we're not having that discussion today. And I think we need to have that discussion. To me, this is so relevant.
I was going to comment, but I'll let Ali Amar comment, as I've already had.
Well, I'll quickly say this because I'm very interested in what you have to say as well, Dr. Gibbs. What we haven't done in the Democratic Party, for one, what we have not done is keep focus on social justice issues. Social justice issues at the table in terms of economics, at the level of our engagement in international policing, and focusing on that as much as we do the need for change in domestic policing. We have not kept our eye on the ball on core social justice issues. So when someone comes in and they begin to say something that sounds a little novel, sounds like they're going to, take a tough stance and rein everything in, there are people who are now so bereft of hope that message begins to resonate. Tucker Carlson was on the stage as a surrogate the other day saying nonsense that I just couldn't even believe a candidate would say. I don't know what the whole mean daddy coming home to spank you was supposed to, invigorate, but it did.
It invigorated somebody.
It invigorated some people. And so we have to stop and say, how did we get so far away from consistent education and messaging around what it means to be a citizen, an active citizen of this republic? Because if you're an active citizen of this republic and people began to say things that are just really, really off kilter, you react to that. But if you don't have even the education, you got a poor civic education, so you don't understand what the rhetoric is. If you don't have access to the type of quality education that helps you to understand the last several wars, but particularly World War II, then None of this seems familiar. You could get a better education, and I'm not plugging anybody's podcast or anything, but you could get a better education off of Rachel Maddow's Ultra than you could off of many classroom textbooks that haven't been updated in decades. We have done terrible things to our educational system that has now bled into the way in which voters are educated and understand what's happening to them. And it's opened them up to an emotionality candidacy. You don't even have to have a policy. You
Mhm.
just got to make us feel a certain way. Yeah. But we deserve policy. We deserve good policy. And we deserve policy that impacts our lives at a social justice level. I'm not safe and I'm not well cared for just because someone starts saying, like Dr. Gibbs said a minute ago, giving lip service to what they could do for me. Lip service won't stop the bombs from falling, but lip service won't save us from Project 2025 either.
Well, I think we're having an honest moment, quite frankly. When people keep saying this is not who we are, I'm like, oh, yeah, we are. This is America, everybody. It is. And I love my country. I've been all over the world, and this is my home.
Mhm.
It is. It is. It is. I'm an American to the core. That having been said, America's got to grow and grow up, Dr. Gibbs. I mean, I'd like you to respond to what you heard from Dr. Amar, because I tell you what, Dr. Amar and Dr. Gibbs,
Mhm.
our public education system has not collapsed; it's being collapsed,
Mhm.
and I'm saying we're in the midst of that.
Mhm.
Dr. Mary Frances Berry, the first Black person to head up a major white university, University of Colorado at Denver, was tasked by President Jimmy Carter with creating the Department of Education. Now, never mind that he didn't ask her to head it, but
Mhm.
he asked her to create it because he knew that it was necessary. It was the last cabinet level department created before Homeland Security. So that's how little we regard education, or maybe that's how much we protect it from the public. Because educated people lead revolutions.
Mhm.
Educated people are governed.
Mhm.
Uneducated people are managed. And I'm wondering if that's the point. Because we entertain everybody to death. I mean, we don't have any newspapers really anymore. I mean, the Chicago Tribune, we're here in Chicago. It's a pamphlet now.
Mhm.
They fired almost their whole newsroom. Nobody's there. I mean, the only newspaper you've got is at the LA Times and New York Times. Those aren't local papers, they're national papers. Washington Post. What?
Mhm.
And they have a little thin local section. They're not thinking about me and how I live.
Mhm.
I mean, what am I supposed to make of this? You talk about protecting democracy. Why don't we protect the republic? Just Dr. Gibbs, what are we doing? This,
I think, I think
I'm just very full because I want so much for us, and I do believe that Kamala Harris means well. I do, but I also know the forces that are arrayed against her, and if she had not worked with them, she would not be where she is.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is, it's not going to work.
Mhm.
This is, and it's not just Gaza. It's you can't have this many people starving in America. It's just. It's,
I think that the Biden presidency has taken what I would call little baby steps aimed at correcting the massive concentration of wealth that we've seen. But they're just baby steps, the very small effects that haven't really changed the distribution of wealth at all. And I think a significant constraint, not the only one, I do want to come back to is military spending. That's about half of federal discretional spending is military spending. And we can expect that, I would assume, to rise given the military adventures we're embarking on just in the last couple of years. And people imagine that things like the Israel-Gaza-Lebanon war, the war in Ukraine are just foreign policy issues, but they're domestic issues because they divert money from other activities like education, healthcare, many others that actually help people. Also, the sanctions the United States imposed on Russia have quite clearly raised costs, particularly for food and to some extent for energy, and therefore lowered living standards as well. Biden admitted this. He called it Putin's inflation, although it's not just Putin is at fault here. And so there's a domestic cost, there's an environmental cost. People forget one of the major drivers of climate change, of carbon emissions, is war, including the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Mhm.
And so these are all interrelated issues. And I think what we have to do to some extent, what I would like to see ideally is a redefinition of nationalism. And let me say, I'm not in principle a nationalist. Actually, I have dual nationality, so I'm not a very good patriot. But I think that reconceptualizing nationalism in terms of helping our own people live better lives might be one way of doing it. I'm thinking back to 1944 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in a famous speech, said, it's our duty to lay the groundwork for an American standard of living higher than ever known before. And the idea is that we would show our national greatness in terms of how well we treat our own people. The high standard of living we're going to give them will show how great we are. And if that's nationalism, then I guess I'm for it. That's a kind of nationalism I could live with. There are other kinds of ways of, if you want to talk about dealing with the world, the U.S. can deal with the world in terms of non-military activities, coordinating for fighting climate change, for fighting, disease, for fighting, make sure children in sub-Saharan Africa are vaccinated for a wide range of things they're not vaccinated. It gets trivial amounts of money, nowhere near the attention of fighting wars.
Right.
And I think that basically that we need that kind of reorientation in our thinking, and neither party is doing it. And unfortunately, I think the Democratic Party seems to want to outclass the Republican Party and how much they can emphasize warfare as one of their central defining features. I find that very disturbing.
Dr. Mar?
One of the things that I keep coming back to just over and over, when I was growing up, my bedroom was a library. I mean, literally a library. I had a very, very large bedroom, and one wall was completely floor to ceiling books. Two of the books that I read as a teenager, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire and The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, constantly stick in my mind when I think about what's happening now. Whenever I'm in Italy, it astonishes me to sort of think of the Roman Empire and how their focus on military expansion presented considerable weakness over time, because it ate up a considerable amount of the strength of the empire, both from a financial perspective and also by removing citizens who could have otherwise participated meaningfully within their own republic. But also because it created enemies everywhere. No one loves an empire. And as we have expanded as an empire and supported the colonization of other nations, and particularly the fact that our efforts to support colonization began during a period of time that decolonization was the global movement. And we stepped in and filled that void. It is deeply troubling to see that. But one of the ways in which we parallel, the United States parallels the decline of the Roman Empire, is that we have focused on distraction of our population instead of caretaking for our population. We feed people media agendas instead of giving them books for education. We have things as ridiculous as the unschooled movement now, because children apparently are supposed to naturally absorb reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of these things. And we are threatening ourselves. The Romans knew that lead was poisonous. They knew that lead had something to do with changes in both behavior and cognition. It seemed to dull the mind, but it sweetened the taste of the wine, and it sweetened the water. And so they continue to line their dishes with it. I think that garbage that we put out constantly, sometimes within our media, sometimes within our political discourse, and our willingness to abrogate our responsibility for the education of our population is detrimental to our society, and that the budget that Dr. Gibbs is about. I remember being on the bus, on my way to Whitney Young, Santita. But
There you go.
being on the bus as a kid in the 1980s and looking at these pie charts, if you've ridden the bus in Chicago, and I don't know if they still have them, but they used to have these large advertisements at the top. And there would be these pie charts showing how much of the budget went to the military.
Mhm.
And I think some of those pie charts actually came from the Chicago Teachers Union, because they used to be screaming around the same time. If you have money to pay for bombs, you have money to pay to educate your students. When we lose that type of messaging within our society, and when we lose our focus on how important it is to have an educated populace, even if educating your populace means that you're going to have more dissenters, you're going to have more intelligence dissenters, people who might want to push back. But you're also going to have fewer Marjorie Taylor Greens that make it into Congress. There's a balance to be struck, because the people will want to hear articulate, intelligent arguments followed by meaningful policy. And I think that we are at a point where if we don't shift where we're going,
Mhm.
we're going to fulfill one of those two books, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, or Rise and Fall of the Third Reich.
Well, my mother thinks we're here, and
Yeah.
and she's seen so much. I believe her. Marjorie Taylor Greene doesn't bother me. Let her go to Congress.
I know.
No, the people they voted her in. I can argue her down.
Mhm.
See, so my thing is, I'm not going to block her, but God bless you,
Bless you.
but she's a very, very real expression of who we are.
Yes. Yes.
What I'm looking for right now, because I don't want to censor anybody. The thing is, what I want is an open pathway so that I can say what I need to say. I don't want to be censored.
Mhm.
I want to make sense, and I want us to have some discussions. I want us to have an agreement on the common good.
Mhm.
I mean, so my question is now, I mean, what are we voting about now, Dr. Gibbs? I mean, do we even know? Because it seems to me that we're voting on personality, not on policy. You hear
Yeah.
people throw out Project 2025, they don't know what's in it.
I do.
You do, because you're brilliant, and you're going to read it. People don't know. They just heard it's a talking point, and have you heard about that?
Mhm.
You've heard one or 2 points, a half of
Mhm.
the opening sentence, and you stopped there.
Right.
And what do we do? What should we be voting for, Dr. Gibbs, and what will help?
One of the things that has been debilitating, I think, has been the culture wars, and a lot of sort of, I think, distracting kinds of issues in some cases, and the culture wars and fake issues to some degree. I would see them that way in many cases, and I think they serve a purpose. Though, and the purpose is that we don't talk about obviously important things. And I think one of the things that it does do, there have been times, again, I've looked at this in the 1970s, and there's no question that the culture wars, well, the modern ones began in the 70s. That's where they began. And they were indeed funded by wealthy people who said in private that this is a good way to get people not to talk about economic inequality. This was a period when the wealthy were trying to ram down people's throats, forgive the phrase, neoliberalism, deregulation, redistribution of wealth upwards, and so on. And they realized how deeply unpopular that was. And in private, they said so, and said, so we can get people talking instead about culture war issues, especially symbolic ones,
Mhm.
Flag burning, that kind of thing. And we're still here doing that. And that's what gives politics a lot of its energy right now, is the culture wars.
Yeah.
Things that really don't matter and aren't even very easy to define. And that's the press loves it. I think, truthfully, the very wealthy love it too.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's been a huge distraction for decades, and it's still something that's very much driving our emotions collectively and driving our politics. And whoever wins on Tuesday, and truthfully, I have no idea who it's going to be at this point,
Mm-hmm.
is going to do it either whether it be Harris or it be Trump, partly upon irrational appeals and irrational issues. But that's the nature of politics right now.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, because many are predicting um, social upheaval, to
Oh,
put
yeah.
it delicately,
Yeah.
November 6th and beyond. Do
Yeah.
you think that that's within the realm of possibility?
Are you asking me or are you
Yeah,
asking me?
I'm asking you and Dr. Amar.
Okay. Should I go first?
You can please go first.
Please,
Absolutely.
please. Yeah.
I think there's a real possibility of violence owing to a lot of very obvious factors. The sheer number of guns. I'm especially worried about the number of automatic weapons in people's hands, the very high level of emotions and mutual hostility and hatred, which is very, very high, highest I've ever seen. I've been around a while. But I think more importantly, there's very specific reasons, which is both parties are laying the groundwork for trying to illegitimate the outcome if it doesn't go their way. Both parties are doing this. Um, Trump is doing this in terms of, claiming all sorts of irregularities. Probably most of them are in his imagination. Um, non-citizens voting and so on. I think they're already laying the groundwork for that as a basis for illegitimizing the election if he loses. But the Democrats are doing that as well. We're hearing the usual boogeyman, the Russians are interfering in the election. The Iranians are interfering in the election. They might as well talk about aliens from outer space, as far as I can tell. But nevertheless, we've had this with us for 8 years now. And this isn't the first time this has happened. It's often forgotten. Again, both parties do this. And I know the Democrats want to pretend it's only the Republicans, but it's not, both parties.
Mm-hmm.
In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost an election that she was expected to win to somebody who was, in my view, rightly considered a bit of a joke, Donald Trump. And it reflected very badly on her and on the party. And what she should have done is ask, what did I do wrong? What did we collectively do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
What can we learn? There was no way they're going to do that. It was the Russians who did it. Okay. It was the Russians who engineered the whole election. And therefore, by implication, at least, it was an illegitimate election and Trump was an illegitimate president. Well, naturally, Trump would do the same thing when he lost in 2020. We all know about January 6th and about all the nutty things he was saying related to January 6th that were not just nutty, but also dangerous. But again, both parties are doing this. And there's a legal phrase, equipoise, where two sides have pretty much matched each other. In respect to breaking down the legitimacy of elections and setting us up for at least the potential for violence, I would see some degree of equipoise here.
Dr. Amar?
I worry deeply about the potential for violence. I also worry, very significantly about what happens to America. And I'll be clear on this. What happens to America if Trump wins? That is something that I'm deeply concerned with. Last time, I was concerned enough that I left the country. I was not here for the Trump years. But I was gone for 6 years in a place where it's safe to walk down the street anytime, day or night. Where
Where were you?
I was in the UAE. I lived in Abu Dhabi and Dubai for 6 years, and I took my youngest son with me, and it was incredible, kind of how that nurtured him and gave him such a global perspective that he still resides outside of the United States, but we can't always simply leave. Now, I deeply appreciate many things about the UAE, and there are things where I'm quite sure that things could be better or done better. But the same is true here, and this is the home of my birth. This is the country of my birth, and I would like to see the country of my birth not be a place that I'm afraid to live in. And as a Muslim, I have had a very challenging relationship with my safety in the United States for quite some time and with our reception in the United States. And I'm now seeing the way in which our lives are certainly undervalued by both parties. It is not something that's unique only to one party, by both parties. And so, regardless of who wins, I think that one person I do believe represents an existential threat to democracy and to the safety of people like me and people like my family. Um, but I think that the other person no longer seems yet to have done enough to really win the vote of people like me and people like my family.
Why?
Well, I'm going to put foreign policy aside. I think that's low hanging fruit. On the domestic side of the agenda, I would like to see far more done for people in marginalized communities. I have the benefit of my education and other factors of protecting me from some of the things that people talk about every day. I push past that in my work, not only as a board member and a supporter of the Inner City Muslim Action Network, where we are working very specifically on helping to build up and change many of the factors that impact people who are otherwise forgotten in our society. We are working with formerly incarcerated people. We are working to get them full-time, gainful employment. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to have to go into the military if you've got as many HVAC certificates and construction certificates and the entrance into a good paying construction job as we get for our green reentry people. Being with an organization that looks and says, hey, there's a food desert out here. Why on earth in the United States of America would there be a food desert? And then we put in a Go Green grocery store that does so much more for the community, not just in terms of the fresh food and things. It shouldn't be up to organizations, smaller organizations and community organizations to do these things when we have a multi-trillion-dollar budget that should be taking care of the citizenry. And so when I say that I don't believe that they have done what they need to do to earn my vote will be earned when American children have excellent educations. My vote will be earned when you can go into any neighborhood in this country and buy a salad easier than you can buy a gun. When you can go into any space available and find citizens who desire to work meaningful, well-paid jobs and train them and match them to those jobs, then you've earned my vote. But if my vote is used to kill my brothers and sisters across the world, not only the Palestinians, but to starve the Sudanese, to harm the Haitians, when my vote is used in so many ways that make me uncomfortable outside of this country, when people hear my American accent or hear me say that I'm American, then you haven't done justice by me, because you won't do justice by me until you do justice by all. And I'm Muslim, but we're going to reflect on the teachings of Jesus for a moment. Do unto the least of them. By the way, that's also an Islamic. I'm not veering from my faith.
But you acknowledge Jesus, and
Absolutely.
So, well, everybody doesn't, and I'm not upset. I'm just saying I think people need to understand that about Islam.
Oh yes, he's revered within Islam.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that the messages of compassion, the messages of peace, the messages of looking out for all members of society, we got to start waking up as Americans and saying that that's who we are, that that's really at our core who we are.
Well, I think that's who we need to be ambitious to become.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we should lie about who we are. Because when some of us are there, some of us are not. Remember Dr. King said to Eric Belfonte and a few other people, he said, look, I only have about 5 or 6 minutes left here, but I want to give them to two of you. He said, ending segregation was the right thing. And he was he was in the throes of his anti-war position, which made him the most unpopular man in America. I mean, that's the guy who my parents went to war for. And he said, and he saw just the structural flaws in our country and in this system. And he said, but I fear that this is a house on fire, and I, I don't want to send my people into the house to let them burn up. And I'm trying to figure out if we should be in the house or should we be the firemen and women who put the fire out.
Mhm.
Um, because, and the thing is, I'm seeing us brown up imperialism and cheer that on
Yeah.
instead of wanting to end imperialism. Period. And that's when we're talking about who we are, and I think those are the questions that we're going to have to answer, because we're cheering on imperialism, and now it's uncomfortable for me to see us begin to do that. Black people.
Yeah. I hope one day you'll have Reverend Otis Moss on. If you do, please have me on with Reverend Otis Moss. We know each other, and he said what you're saying.
I've had this conversation with his father down through the years.
Mm-hmm.
Because these are the conversations I had at my table. Look, my father, when they say he ran for president and changed the Democratic Party, no, he changed politics and changed the way we see things.
Mm-hmm.
The reason he could go overseas, Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Amar, and get people is because they saw him as an extension of the King tradition.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you're not an imperialist.
Mm-hmm.
So Castro said, we receive you.
Mm-hmm.
Gorbachev said, I'll meet with you, Reverend.
Mm-hmm.
Kosovo, okay, we'll release them to you. Because we see that you're not part of this. But when Colin Powell went to the UN
Mm-hmm.
and was not truthful, when they saw Condoleezza Rice, I heard them say, we began to look at Black people as being in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my thing is now, as Americans, who are we? See, we're having an honest moment now.
Mm-hmm.
We're being very honest about who we are and who we've been. We're genociding people, but we're also liberating people. We're people who say, I want everyone to have access to liberty and life and the pursuit of happiness. But we make a lot of people unhappy because we block their paths to actualization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to find out, as we're coming into this moment, as we're cheering, and some of us are jeering, what are we doing?
We've always been aspirational and hypocritical at the same time. Our founding fathers created a Declaration of Independence that excluded people like us. But in our aspiration, we have successfully changed this union and the nature of who we are. Yeah, decade after decade, generation after generation.
Well, that's the genius of our Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it left space. My brother Jesse, who's such a scholar of this, he said, the genius of our founding documents is that these men of the Enlightenment knew that they did not know everything.
Mm-hmm.
So they left space for you to even change the government. Mm-hmm. It no longer worked. Mm-hmm. I think we're afraid of that because the oligarchs have taken over.
Right.
But, look, I'm going to cede the last 5 minutes to you guys. And Dr. Amar, you got a couple of minutes. And I just want
I'll let Dr. Gibbs go first because I jumped in with a comment. So.
I mean, it's just, because I need us to wrap this up. And, I could talk to you all night long because I think that I want everyone to get out and vote. But I want us to begin to start thinking very critically about who we are and who we need to be. Because whoever gets in, and I do hope it's Kamala Harris, but whoever gets in, you're going to have to fight. I mean, the presidency is structured in such a way that they can come in with the highest aspirations, I think, and it's a whole different deal. The oligarchs run the place. What did Dick Durbin say when Goldman Sachs stuck us up for $770 billion after having held us up for $20+ trillion? Mm-hmm. He said, look, let's be honest. The bankers run the place. Mm-hmm. He said that in 2008. He said it.
Yeah.
And it's, and yet Appalachian whites are still starving and working hard every day. Blacks in the Mississippi Delta and white folks in the Mississippi Delta are starving every day, drinking and relieving themselves in the same bodies of water. I mean, come on.
But Dr. Gibbs, wasn't it Benjamin Franklin, I think, I could be wrong about this, who basically said that we needed to protect the country from the bankers? That part.
That's a part of U.S. history that I haven't really looked at very carefully.
No,
So
Okay.
what he did say
validate
at the conclusion
Okay.
of the someone, a woman.
I wish he had said that. If he hasn't, it's unfortunate.
I know that it
Absolutely.
was one of the founding fathers that said that.
Well, it was one of the founding fathers. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was Jefferson or one of them did
I
say.
keep thinking that it was Benjamin Franklin who
Could have
wanted the nation to be insulated from the influence of the bankers.
Well, because there was a lot of debate about the bankers because that was a pushback on Hamilton, right?
Yes.
I mean, and so, but someone did ask him what kind of government you've given us, and he said a republic if you can keep it.
Yes. If you can.
And I guess my question is, what will it take to keep the republic as we get out and vote everybody? Because when you're voting on that. Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, one of the preeminent ministers and theologians of the age, said it works when you work it.
Mhm.
Works when you work it. So, Dr. Amar, let me start with you, and then Dr. Gibbs, historian, let me end with you, and then we are going to get out of here. Dr. Amar.
I think my core message is that, I'm going to take it as a person of faith and as a citizen. As a person of faith, I have a deep belief that the core of goodness and our ability to discriminate good from evil, right from wrong, is something intrinsic to every person. And insofar as we are not going to find pure good or pure evil in either party, do have to ask ourselves, is there a good that we can strive for more earnestly with the candidate that you are aligned with? And if so, what is that good? Because if that good is only good to you, it's not really good. If that good means that you're okay and your neighbor isn't okay, that's not what good looks like. And so we have to be willing to look at ourselves and appreciate what we have and appreciate the need for those around us to also have. In my faith, we have a saying that whosoever eats his fill while his neighbor goes hungry is not from among us. This is something that our prophet said. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So out of this saying, there is an intrinsic need to look constantly at what is happening for your neighbor. Am I having enough and my neighbor is still going hungry? I don't belong to the group of people who are claiming to be trying to move towards the greater good and the pleasure of God. As we go to the polls, and I hope everybody gets out there and goes and votes. But as we go out there and vote, ask yourself, if you're okay, is your neighbor okay? Who do you think of as your neighbor in this global community?
Dr. Gibbs?
I think what the United States really needs, maybe more now more than ever, it hasn't had, is a kind of a authentic working class party that throws together people across racial lines. Is a multiracial country, so it would have to be across multiracial lines. There's no other way to do it. And that will appeal to the sense of people's fundamental need. They have many needs, obviously, but one of them quite clearly is to be able to pay the rent, to pay for medical care, and pay for food. For many people, I'd say for most, that comes first. I mean, before almost anything else is, how do I pay the rent this month? And people are entitled to be worried about their living standards, which have, for most people, declined in the last 50 years. And, as Dr. Amar has noted, as Santita, you've noted many times on this show, there's a lot of people whose needs are simply not being met. And what we need is a political movement that will basically not just address those needs, but sort of bring them together as a powerful force. And that will change U.S. politics and give working people some say in the process, something they don't really have now, to get beyond kind of the sort of petty culture war issues that we're obsessed with here, and also to bring into the issue of militarism, partly because, again, it works to lower people's living standards as well as send them overseas and get them killed and kill many other people. People forget. I believe if memory serves, 7,000 Americans were killed in the war on terror. A million plus Iraqis, hundreds of thousands of people elsewhere, but also Americans were killed, and they've been damaged physically and psychologically. I've seen some of these people in my classes, as I've said, and we need a movement that will address their needs and not just the needs of elites. And that's something so far neither party has done. I had some hope for the Bernie Sanders campaign, which was showing some glimmers of that being a real possibility, but unfortunately it was not sustained. And so I think that's a huge gap in American politics that needs to be filled.
Well, and I think that as people have embraced those candidacies, when we see those bursts of healing light, like we saw with Bernie Sanders, like we saw with Reverend Jackson, like we saw with Dr. King, and we just keep on going. Hopefully one day we will, and the fire is burning in each of us. I hope that we will really vote on that. That's really the meaning of keeping hope alive, everyone. Hope is not empty. Hope is of faith. Hope helps to get you through the day into the next one. Because there's got to be something better than this. And there is. But we're going to have to change our minds.
Yes, we are.
In order to create a more perfect union and then create the beloved community. That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And that's not idealistic in
it's a high ideal that's real.
That is something that I think is grounded in the best of who we can be. Right. And why shouldn't we be aspirational towards good? You know, we shouldn't just be competing constantly to be the best at the worst things. We should be aspirational towards good.
Mm-hmm. Billie Holiday sang her best music as she was leaving, and she was ill. But, you know, and some people, sometimes it's that old woman in the back pew who's tone deaf, bringing you to your knees. Because you know, I don't care what color she is. Because I have been to all kinds of churches, and I thank God that my father has had a ministry that's taken us everywhere. And we've seen everybody. And there is a common tie of humanity that links us all, everybody, believe it or not. I've seen people catch the Holy Spirit in Northern Ireland. I've seen it. People who've been crushed, but who refuse to have their spirits broken. People who don't have heat. You think we're the only people who experience poverty in this world? No. I think we're the only people who don't understand, who live with the crushing nature of empire. There's some people who do that all over the world, and they see it and they know it. And what we need to do is come together, everybody. Let us break bread together on our knees. That is what the song says. And when we fall on our knees and our faces are to the rising sun, oh Lord, Allah, whatever you call the Creator, it's one. Have mercy on all of us. And let us vote for each other. Not just for me, for we. Me can't win if we don't win. How about that? I don't care how ungrammatical that is. Me just win and we don't win, it's not a win. It's a loss.
Yeah.
So everybody, come on. Lord, have mercy on all of us, because we all need grace. We all need mercy. And remember, there's a November 6th, everybody. Remember that. But vote today.
Yes.
Because your life and the lives of your neighbors and the lives of people all around the world, oh my Lord, depend upon it. So God bless you, everybody. And Dr. David Gibbs, The Revolt of the Rich. Everybody get his book. If you want to understand how we got from really just the promise of the 60s, what happened afterwards, because my father said slave masters never retire. That's what this book is about. The revolt of the rich, because they came after us after we had all those wins, and they've not stopped coming.
Yes.
But the good news is we haven't stopped fighting back, some of us. Now more of us need to come together and do the same. Red, yellow, black, brown, and white, my father says, we're all precious in God's sight, and we are one family. We are that. I love you, Dr. Amar. I love you, Dr. Gibbs, and I love your wife and thank her for lending you to us. She sent me the loveliest note, and I just want to thank her for supporting you in your work.
Oh, well, thank you for having me on, Santita. And it's been a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Omar.
It's been a pleasure as well. I hope that we get to connect again.
Well, he's part of the family. You all are part of the family. This lovely family that you, everybody, everyone within the sound of our voices, I thank you for coming together with all of us. And because Jewel, Carol, Saskia, and my sister from another mister, and Wanda, Miss Wanda, just everybody, we're all family. Please share this show and get out and vote. Vote.org. Find out if you're still on the voter rolls. If you vote provisionally, I hope that you won't do that. But when you get to the polls, if you have a problem, call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. But remember, if you vote provisionally, you must cure the vote, which means you'll have to go to the election office the next day and prove that you live where you live and that you are who you are. You have to have you have to have actual photographic ID and a utility bill. But you're going to have to cure that provisional vote, otherwise it will be thrown out. So please go to vote.org or call 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Protect your vote. Go to gregpalace.com or saveyourvote.org and see the film Vigilantes Inc. You need to understand about these new voter suppression hitmen. And may God bless you. If you need us at Rainbow Push, call 773-FREEDOM. That's real easy. We will help you in any and every way that we can, as we've been doing for 60 plus years. I love you, everybody. May God bless you real good. And go out there and be a blessing to somebody else outside of your own family. How about that? Try them apples. Sending you all so much love.